And hello. Welcome everyone to this week's webinar with Lumar, where we are getting into the nitty-gritty of how to perform SEO QA tests and why they're important. You've all joined us for today. If you have teammates who are looking forward to finding this webinar, it will be available on demand later, along with a full write-up. I have the pleasure of introducing my two panelists today. Mimsy, please introduce yourself and your magical companion.
Hello, my name is Myriam Jessier, and this is Moching, also known as Momo, my travel and life companion.
Myriam works at PRAGM as a technical SEO and trainer, so teaching companies across the world how to have best practices, accessibility standards, and make their sites better for all users and bots. Also with us today is the indomitable Gianna. Gianna, would you please introduce yourself and your charming companion?
My pleasure. Hello, everyone. My name is Gianna Brachetti-Truskawa, and I have my companion Connie with me.
Wonderful. And Gianna works at DeepL, the world's most accurate translator, and will be giving you juicy details about SEO QA automation. And of course, Connie is here to ask all the questions that you were too afraid to ask. We have a chat box that'll let you ask questions available to everyone in attendance right now. As we go along, if you don't understand something, there are no dumb questions. If you want more information, we welcome that. We'll do Q&A at the end of the webinar. And with that, let's go ahead and kick off our adventure. Because today is the 12 days of SEO QA testing. Yes, you will leave this with that terrible jingle in your head. Mims, do you want to sing our first verse?
I can't sing to save my life. It's a tragedy. So we will just, either pass it along to someone more musically inclined, or I could just read it.
On the first day of Christmas, my good friend brought to me a crawler and a Christmas tree. Let's talk about a crawler and what that means for you as an SEO QA.
So I couldn't imagine doing QA without a crawler. And that's kind of important to me because I know that not everyone considers it this way, but to me, it's the first step. We have to get started, get it going, see what's going on, save it for later if you want to compare. So crawler it is. Gianna, your take?
What a crawler is, or what we bring.
Why is it so necessary to QA?
Well, because if we don't do it, there's going to be. So I have this wonderful meme that I will share again later. If you don't QA, you risk literally losing all of your traffic or all of your data because maybe your website is doing well, but the tracking isn't. So it's literally just to save you money and also some nerves.
I mean, it's a lot about matching expectations to reality. We're in that holiday season. Inevitably, someone has done their holiday shopping on Wish. And Wish presents to you the idea that a product will look and act like X. And then you get it and you realize, oh, there's a reason it was 49 cents. So we get to match what we perceive and expect to happen versus what is actually occurring. And those two can have very big gaps between them.
Not only that, but when you think about it, you do need the crawler because you can't test everything by hand, right? We do have a few QA scenarios and QA cases to discuss where the crawler will be very much needed.
Absolutely. We can't fix what we can't see. And the crawler gets out there and actually lets us see everything that is. We can go ahead and devise all of the tests with our good intentions, write that list to Santa, but we may be missing critical behavior patterns and functionalities that aren't readily available or visible to us, especially if you're hopping into any site which has legacy code. And I mean, let's be honest, it's 2022. They're all made of legacy code. All right, let's get our second gift. A good friend brought to me 2 great QA cases.
The first one is, let's hope we avoid deploying broken code. This can really, really help. And the other one, Gianna can tell you about it because, ooh, they have experience in this.
We're looking at detecting and fixing errors. And maybe it's really helpful for us to differentiate right now for those joining who haven't done QA before, why these two are different. So the first one being avoiding deploying broken code, that's really about proactive QA. We're looking at doing this in a pre-production environment. Our goal is to avoid deploying broken code, and it should require authentication and access. So not everyone's going to have that capability. Sometimes you can't get the tool to run in that environment or you don't have access to it. Lumar is pretty great. You actually can configure all these options and authentications into your crawler before you run it. And Gianna, let's add into here. When we're proactive in our QA, when we're working in our lower environments, what do people need to know?
So they need to know that on the one hand, like you really do need to have that test environment. If you don't have that, that's obviously going to become a problem. I have done my fair share of QA on productive environments at 4 a.m. It's not great. But you should especially remember that if you use a crawler, as you can see here, you have to authenticate. The authentication should be in place, because if it's not, then
we can have serious
yeah.
fallout. We're looking at unauthenticated pre-prod environments resulting in duplicate sites being indexed, security vulnerabilities, and a visit from the Krampus. Pretty rightfully deserved.
It's actually the first thing that I check when I work with new sites is like checking in Google search if one of their test environments might be, because some use just standard subdomains that you can guess, and then you can see if there's anything indexed that really shouldn't be, and it's not the productive environment.
I love using built with. I can actually see all of the subdomains associated. And a lot of times when I get in there, I'll find dev staging, Mark's staging, all of those pieces, which means they were publicly facing. They are accessible in some form.
This brings me to something else. Why do we need to be proactive? Because whenever you ask someone to fix something in terms of technical SEO, what could happen? They could break something else and they are not going to tell you about it because, hey, they fixed the thing you asked. The end. So to avoid some really, really bad SEO trauma, we highly recommend you go with proactive SEO QA.
Well, let's look at the other option, this reactive SEO QA. This is that famous meme of, fuck it, we'll do it in prod. We have to go out into the live world at the same time that users and search engines are scampering about. And sometimes we find things like, oh no, our top organic pages are suddenly all returning 302s. What's happening?
This is very expensive, very fast. So for example, if a specific portion of your revenue depends on organic traffic, anything that happens on your productive environment, without you being able to actually test that first, can be expensive. First of all, usually you only find out, if you don't do proper QA before, you only find out once the shit has already hit the fan. So meaning this had already cost money. Then you need to allocate some time to actually try and find out why it's happening, like looking for the needle in the haystack. That also takes a lot of time during which you can't do anything else, and time during which the company is constantly losing money. And then fixing it in hindsight is just way more costly. So after all, it's just
exhausting. Absolutely, because his team already has the next sprint set up. The team already has their goals. And now you're trying to go, I need you to put a hot fix in and actually detract from your next sprint, your next deadline for your OKRs this quarter in order to fix this. So we actually had a really good question. So I want to pop back right here. Someone asked the distinction between authentication and DNS pairing. Oftentimes used in tandem. Basically, you're giving a pseudo host name with a DNS and an IP attached to the authentication itself. You're going to have your name and password. Fingers crossed, not everyone's using the same authentication to access an environment, because that's how we have a bad time. And if you're looking for ways to figure out if there's changing environments out, Built With, great resource. Go there. You can see all the subdomains. Usually staging environments are a subdomain to be able to find staging.mysite.com. You can also use Bing Webmaster Tools. They're incredibly transparent. So leverage your GSE authentication to open it in Bing Webmaster Tools. Go to Site Explorer. You'll be able to see all of the subdomains and even security variations in there. Gianna, what did you just add there for, you're typing it in chat, my friend. Our dear viewers can't read that. Tell me more about how you use a query to bring this up.
So the query that I would be using is usually a very simple one at the very beginning, just site and then domain.com. And then I exclude www by minus www, and then I see what comes up. And usually, sometimes you find the subdomains that make sense that they use, I don't know, blog.x or whatever. So then I exclude those as well. So rinse and repeat. And eventually I come up with things that are surprisingly the static environments. Of course, you can also screen for things that many people use, like test.dev. But again, they might, as you have just shown in the previous screenshot, you might just use something entirely different. And then if you can't actually scan for that, then yeah, you just exclude the most obvious, and then you see what comes up.
There's an obvious test you should also be running if you're starting with any new client, website, whatever else. Lorem ipsum, you will be finding a lot of demo content.
Also, bacon ipsum, that's always fun to find in production. There's a lot of fun ipsum generators out there. And when you find them on prod, it's the same result no matter what. It's always like, oh no. And it is, wrong way. It is big Krampus vibes every time. So it is better that we identify the Krampus on our roof before we're in production and all the happy children are here to come get their presents than after. One thing I want to shout out is we have a fantastic new feature with Lumar. It is our Protect product. And what it does is it allows you to go ahead and run audits in lower environments or in production with a series of tests that have pass-fail on them. You can set thresholds to them. There's 200 plus tests available in there. If you want to get a peek at the functionalities, go ahead and go to this lumar.io/platform/protect. It is pretty handy because fundamentally, you'd be amazed in the places a Krampus can hide in your site. So having automated tools are your friend. And now let's go to the third day of Christmas and the 3 scenarios full of joy.
Can you bring up the next slide then, please?
Absolutely.
Yes. So I take number 1, that's the relaunch. So usually when you relaunch the site, and this can be various parts, for example, changing your URLs, you absolutely have to do some QA just before and then also after the relaunch, and both on the test environment as well as on the stage on the productive environment.
And what happens whenever you go and say, we're doing a relaunch, aren't we? And people are like, no, we're not doing something so drastic.
We're just doing a redesign.
Exactly. So this is something to also keep in mind, because you will be looking for specific things. For example, if you redesign and in that redesign you change CMS because it's a very light redesign, consider that. If you change your theme, these are things that you should be checking. So when we say that you have to do SEO QA, that's great, but QA comes in different flavors. So you should have a checklist or a go-to when you want to check these things, depending on the scenario. These are only 3 scenarios we're presenting, but there are quite a few more that you will encounter in your day-to-day life. So now let's move on to everyone's favorite, the one nobody has time for, Jamie, ongoing QA.
Why would I do ongoing QA? What's the use case for me going ahead and doing something so silly?
Ask a developer and they will tell you it's already done. It's not.
Well, and it comes down a lot to ongoing QA. As we release new features, new functionalities, they're changing the environment of our site. They're changing how it works, how users interact with it. And a lot of times we can have merge conflicts. We can have functionalities kind of bump heads in an ugly way and get unexpected fallout from that. Or perhaps a new release that goes out, someone didn't understand what a particular section of code meant. It wasn't commented, so they removed it. They thought they were crafting and making a more efficient bundle.
I love how technical you get. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. Has anyone listening or watching this gone, what happened? And you find out the CEO or a VP or someone who should not be messing in the website decided, oh, this checkbox, I must check it right now. I'm going to nuke the entire German version of the site by doing this, but it's a checkbox and I want to check it. So then ongoing QA can really, really help because you can catch these unexpected changes.
I mean, I feel like Twitter is a pretty good example of that. If we want to talk about when a new person comes in with a very high title and decides that these things are no longer needed, ongoing QA is a ready to go checklist that goes through and goes, oh, actually, that's all of the two-step authentication. Maybe we leave that one in place.
One thing that is very important to keep in mind, and that also saves lives, probably, especially when new people come in that might make weird decisions, is to save your bot, keep a shit list. So
yes.
What I mean by that is through QA or even through some alerts, you will always figure out, eventually there's a new mistake, and you will figure out why that happened, and you will just put that on your shit list, because then you can always pull that shit list up. If someone says, oh, why are you spending time on QA? We want you to focus on growth. We want you to focus on keyword research or whatever. And then you can say, well, hello, this all happened and it cost us a lot of money on rankings. Do you
and that
really
list could include zombie issues, things that you fixed, but somehow they keep rising back up. I don't know if anyone's dealt with those. I definitely have.
Yep.
I have 3 cases I'm going to go over really, really quickly when it comes to ongoing QA. You do have the zombie thing. So I kept doing QA, kept bringing up an issue, took 3 months for the dev team to go, actually, you were right. We had a script running every day at 5 a.m. that would undo all of the fixes that you would implement. So yes, ongoing QA is very, very important. And sometimes you have to explain a few things to a few folks and you're like, I already told you this is happening. Please take care of it and you can keep track. But the 4th day is already here.
The 4th day is upon us. Actually, they trounced on in as you were talking, because this brings us to having that list of things we always check. And on the 4th day, our good friends brought to us 4 elements to always check.
So these are, for example, and again, there's way more elements to check, but just to give you a hint on where to start and what to do at minimum, look at critical pages. Critical pages are, for example, your checkout page. We will name a few more later on today, but critical pages that inform what your business is about, or critical pages that you want to rank with, the critical pages that you make money with. So you should be knowing which ones these are, and you should always check those.
Our 80-20 rule.
Yes.
80% of our traffic is going to 20% of those pages.
Well, also, I wouldn't just generally, it depends on how large the domain is. So I worked with a domain previously that had 65 million URLs. Even with the 80-20 rule, that is a lot of URLs.
Yes.
And there's still, and for QA, there's some stuff that you can do in bulk, but there's also some stuff that needs to be checked manually. So for the critical pages, what I would do in that case is usually you go by templates, right? So I pick the templates and I check maximum 3 pages manually per template, not just one. But assuming that if something is wrong in all the 3, then that potentially means it's wrong in all pages of the same template, makes it a higher priority to fix, and so on.
I mean, we have core functionalities. We've got user flows. So these are key ways people are moving across pages, and manually checking user flows is very useful because it's not something a bot can do. If it requires interaction, our body friends don't have fingers, Mims.
So something I'd like to say about this is your critical pages are not Gianna's critical pages, are not Jamie's critical pages. So you have to define this as a company and get it approved. Sometimes as an SEO, you're the only one who will say, hey, critical pages are this, let's just document it. And when it comes to core functionalities, there's a little thing that most people haven't checked in the EAT guidelines. Google says, hey, if you're an e-commerce store, we should be able to add a product in the basket and it should work. Does this become an automatic SEO QA thing that you should be doing? Well, of course, there's plenty of other teams that will technically check this and tell you they did. But we recommend, if it is within the realm of SEO, that you handle it, just because you make sure everything is done properly. That's the point of QA.
Absolutely. And a lot of it is just going to tie back to, what are your core SEO functionalities? What are if you're working on a sprint cycle, fingers crossed, you're part of the SEO QA process. You helped refine the ticket the devs worked on. You gave them the acceptance criteria, and the critical functionalities are those that you have had built into the site. You are the steward of them, and any functionality on the site without a steward is also known as a liability. So being able to check those is very useful. There's a lot of technical things that we can catch with the bots, things like 301 redirects, broken breadcrumbs, broken image tags. This, again, I do love this functionality because it is a sanity saver for folks who do a lot of QA, have rapid release cycles, is built into that Protect product. All right, our 5th day of Christmas. This is really juicy. It's a big GSC thing to keep in mind.
Myriam, do you want to?
I'm going to let Gianna explain this one, because this is something that all three of us have a tendency to go, oh, and there's this one thing. So Gianna, without further ado, there's this one thing everyone should know.
So the one thing everyone should know is they have a time delay in a lot of things that they report to you, and they also have a time frame. And for Core Web Vitals, which is, everyone's looking at the Core Web Vitals, but they have like a time frame, which is 28 days, during which, after which, the Core Web Vitals for your pages will be reassessed. However, you will not know when your period actually started or when it ends, which means you might see errors now that you think you might have fixed, and maybe you have, but for the next 28 days, because you're unlucky, your cycle might just have started without you knowing. Then it might take 28 days minimum for that to be reassessed, so you can actually see the fruit of your labor, so you can actually see if that worked out in your favor or not.
And this is important to know, because you will run into scenarios where you will bring up issues, right? Core Web Vital issues, for example, and your peers that work in the developer side will go, but we fixed this, but we did this. And then you're left fighting another human, and you don't have all the information. Now you do. Now you can explain the context and explain why this thing is popping up quite a few days or, a few weeks later compared to when you last spoke. And this is also what keeps my partnership alive. I have to keep reminding my partner of this, going, yes, I know you fixed this. However, remember, 28 days.
It's good as an expectation and an understanding. When you've got common understandings and expectations. I mean, I've definitely been in a room where the CEO tried to press for, what's the analysis say? Is the data ready? I'm like, no, it's not valid yet. I can't present this to you because it's incomplete. That would be misleading. So I'm afraid you have to be patient. And there's nothing he hated more than being told he had to be patient. So having a clear understanding and sources of truth. So any changes you make for Core Web Vitals, going to take at least 28 days for us to see those results reflected in our GSC data. Hey, this is the common source of truth when it comes to what our core pages are. These are all really useful things because they set a common language and common ground as we work to improve the site and have a baseline of how it should perform. What is our QA compared against?
It also makes it way more important to get proper monitoring systems in place for yourself, so you can reassess it on your own before Google does, so that you can actually see, it should work out. So you don't have to wait those 28 days.
All right, let's get to our 6th day of Christmas. And on this day, we get a list of key pages in a nutshell. This ties back to our 4th day.
Absolutely. And what do you consider? Well, depending on whether your site is B2B, e-commerce, informational, you may have a different set. However, we are here to get you started thinking about that set. So what do you check no matter what? the home page, you know that this page has a tendency to get most of the backlinks, most of the visits for most websites, obviously, not all of them. So yes, this goes on your list. Your service and product pages, these are the money makers that help you actually thrive as a business. So that goes on the list as well. Your about page is very important for EAT purposes, but beyond that,
Yes.
why does this matter in a lot? Well, a few years ago, I made a joke on my personal website going, and I also speak Hungarian, like ponies, and can help you optimize your tech stack. And I had people making pony jokes to me for a solid year, with me wondering, why is everyone talking to me about ponies? That's the power of the about page. People will check it out. They really, really do care about this. Blog articles, they get you in there. I mean, they're the inspirational content. They're top of the funnel very often. They are, what
The first
really
step of
gets...
awareness. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And category pages, not saying that every single website should be optimizing these, but category pages have a real place in SEO. They are a hub within your website. So please,
A hub of
check them
knowledge
out.
about that category topic. They show
Yes.
how authoritative you are in there, which ties back to our idea of EATs. We have that blog page because in the search quality ranking guidelines, they specifically are told to look for the about page because that verifies, is this a real human? And that's very important, especially everybody got scammed at least once, I think, in early pandemic trying to buy something online. And there was a lot of exploitation that happened. So the verification, the process of ensuring this is a real human, this is a real company, becomes very useful to the point where it's now part of EAT.
Yes.
EAT, forgive me, forgive the faux pas. I still say SEMrush and I won't change it.
You know what? I decided to switch over to SEMrush. But one last thing that we should check, and oh, my dog has decided to wake up. I thought she was under the ASMR spell. So
Christmas Momo.
You need to check the key core functionalities. Like if you are a software company, your demo page, please check it. It's vital. Okay. If you're an e-commerce site, the checkout, very important. Let's say that you are, I don't know, a beauty clinic, a construction company, your contact page.
Contact us. Yeah. Like,
yes.
I want to give you my money. You're a local business, but your contact form is broken.
This happens way more than people think because, hey, there's that WordPress plugin you didn't update that one time. Here it is.
A WordPress plugin without updates or so monitoring it is also known as a liability.
A strong one.
Let's go to our 7th day of Christmas and QA that's ongoing. We give ourselves this gift of not doing QA as a one and done shop, but instead understanding that it's part of the cycle of release for code and changes and overall site health. Your dev team probably has a release engineer who runs smoke and sanity tests before that code goes out into production. Those smoke and sanity tests are meant to look at a lot of core functionalities they're focused on. In the same way, SEO QA does this. We look for, is something on fire? Is there smoke? And sanity, does this make logical sense? Are the titles that are dynamically generated accurate? Or are they suddenly making word salad?
I like the fact that whenever we bring ongoing QA to some teams, we get the reaction that is similar to a, 3 or 4-year-old child understanding, oh, this toothbrushing business is going to be forever and multiple times a day. Yes, it is. But there's a very good reason. So you really do need to carve out that space to check this stuff. And Gianna can take it over with everything that should be checked.
Let's look at all elements that can change.
Yeah, so
well, not all of them, because woof.
Every little thing can change. I mean, we have been talking about like usual cases when you should be doing QA at the beginning, right? So probably you remember we talked about redesign, and I was often asked at conferences, like, why would I check for the redesign? It's just the design. Well, because, for example, in redesign, someone decided to get rid of the sidebar. But if that's your main element for internal links, then, well, you have a problem. But the main, so these are the core elements, and of course, each of these elements can be checked in various ways. But the things that you should check at minimum are, and always check every single time, are robots directives. Don't be told by anyone, hey, but our tickets didn't make any changes to those, because there's always something changing without that being reflected in the tickets of that specific sprint. So this is something that you always have to check, no matter what has been done in that sprint. So robots
the next
directives,
robots canonical comes out and it uses the staging host name as the canonical.
Yep. Exactly. So it can, like, the robots directives can sit in various places, which is why you have to check variously. So meta robots in the HTTP headers, the robots.txt. Then yeah, there's the HTTP headers that you have to check separately. There might be stuff in there that's maybe the caching rule has changed, things that you need to check, or maybe suddenly hreflags that were in there have disappeared, or there's directives in there that are contradictory. So for example, the HTTP headers have X robots tag none, but actually you want that site to be indexed and everything else is saying please be indexed. Can happen. How the page is rendered, this could change. This need to be checked, because maybe someone
This
is
only
using
made an element on click. Oh boy.
I call
or
this,
maybe they are using a new.
I call this red wine QA testing. Let me explain. Please
do.
So if your website's SEO depends on me feeling generous because I've had 1 or 2 glasses of red wine and suddenly worry about you as a client, and I'm going to go check your site just because, and I'm going to find that your developer copy pasted the pre-prod and, you know, that lovely no index in there, and your entire website ended up off of Google. This is bad. You do not want me as a consultant to have 1 too many glasses of wine to care about you. You should do this by yourself without having to expect this. Same thing when it comes to how the page is rendered or internal links. Once again, let me explain. If you are paying me to write beautiful SEO optimized copy for your website, and on a whim, because I needed some inspiration, the red wine QA came along and your page is just not rendered, what's the point of me writing all of this? I have to let you know.
Not rendered cannot rank.
Absolutely. So I had to have this uncomfortable call saying, I QA'd your site, and why are you having me write this? This is not your primary problem here. Same for internal links. If you are an e-commerce brand and some team somewhere decided to have, you know, all the important links on the homepage or the key category pages point to, you know, like a series, like a collection, let's say the Halloween stuff when Christmas is right around, please don't do this.
Absolutely. So let's look at what should ongoing QA consist of.
So it should consist of a good mix of 2 things. So on the one hand, you have regular checks, meaning those checks that we just mentioned. These need to be checked every single time. And then we have really specific checks. So if you know what's been in the sprint, again, if you're lucky to know, because if the company is fairly large and you have different product teams all working independently, then you might not always know. And that's when you need monitoring and automated checks and alerts. And we'll come to some of those later. But
I mean, a group of crows is called a murder, a group of lions is called a pride, and a group of developers is called a merge conflict. So you could have 2 different teams release code and have serious headbutting because there's not cross functionality in their pillars.
Yeah, and something that also we need to keep in mind, like for example, for regular checks is even if, so I would still perform a regular check even if there wasn't a large deployment, because for example, maybe there's automated things that have been changing server side and nobody thought about telling you because it's not front end. So for example, some cron jobs running that suddenly failed or someone made a change to them. For example, how they generate sitemaps.
Sitemap build broke. Yep.
And that can happen. But when we come back to the really specific checks, what I always tell people to do is, if you know what's being released, let yourself be given a list of tickets. Unless you're managing them yourself, then you have that list already, and try to check for each ticket. Could any of that ticket, anything, influence the holy trinity of, let's say, website accessibility for search engines, meaning does it change how the website is crawlable? Does it change how it's indexable? Does it change whether or not it's rankable? Because you can even check that on a technical level to a degree.
Oh, Mimsy has her hand up. What is up, my dear?
I was trying to actually let everyone know, but I was doing this in the chat. I didn't know I clicked. My dog is falling asleep for real and snoring, so I have to mute myself quite a bit more.
I
So
actually feel great about the it's like the crackling of a fireplace, but it's Momo, the Christmas dog, gently snoring and enjoying life. I am going to use this slide as an opportunity to say, let's give the gift of giving. When you create an SEO specific ticket, hopefully you've written a user story. And with that, hopefully you've written acceptance criteria. AC simply means, what does done mean? What does good mean? And if you do this well, when it comes to release specific checks, you've actually done future you and the QAs involved a favor, because now they know what done and good means. And when we keep those...
Future us is going to love this, because if you go to the next gift...
Absolutely. Gold and Silver Council.
This is what you're doing. So let's continue. This is very important. Please continue listening to Jamie about this.
It's this gift of Gold and Silver Council, because we all want to make good things. We all want to do good work. We all want that work to be found, and we need to know what good means. You have an expertise in telling him good to be found by a search engine means X, Y, and Z. And this is where we have that gift of giving. We figure out who is responsible for QA, who gets the alerts when the cron job to build your sitemap fails, who is the person that you need to know very well. Bring them some Christmas cookies, because they're the one who logs tickets. You want to be able to talk with them and sit down and go, I would like to write a user story with you. Know what's required, what fields are needed.
I have a horror story, and this should have gone for Halloween, but we'll take it for Christmas.
Krampus.
Imagine, yes, this is a genuine Krampus moment. So I used to work in a very, very big financial institution, and I moved on and I set up, okay, so I was told this colleague is going to take over for you. So I made sure that he was responsible for the QA, and I made sure that he would receive the alerts. 2 years later, I get an email telling me, touché, Myriam, touché. And I'm like, what is going on? Apparently, me setting up the automatic alerts, there was a message saying, hello, this should be checked by a colleague named XYZ in XYZ department. However, knowing him the way I know him, this will probably not be opened, and you will be seeing this as he is handing this responsibility off to you, the new SEO. And exactly 2 years later, there was a handoff, and he did have to open those emails, and he was like, I am passing the archive to the next person. Don't be me. Really do sit down, make sure that the person is going to handle it, not just say, yeah, I will handle it. Because like we said, nobody has time for SEO QA, so nobody has time to actually fix the stuff. Carve out the time. Make sure that you know who's responsible for what within the company.
All right, and let's give everyone here a big, beautiful gift. Dear webinar friends, our lovely guests today have made you a complete checklist. You can use it as it suits you. You can make a copy and modify it. Thank you, you wonderful elves.
So this checklist, if you don't like the colors, change it. If you don't like some of the stuff that's in there, change it. The end game is that it should be yours. We made it in a way that it should be stolen and adapted. So imitation is the best form of flattery. Please take this and make it your own.
We are going for absolute steal this vibes, and I am here for it. Let's look at our 9th day of Christmas and the automation that is helping. So how do we do this at scale? Keep our sanity, keep moving.
So I'm going to intro this because Gianna is absolutely taking this one. Let me tell you why. I have to be a hype friend here. If you are in charge of an entire empire of domains, you should be automating things. If you only have one domain, but it is tentacular, you should be automating this. If you are the lone SEO in your company, you should be automating some of this.
If
Gianna,
you value
take it away.
sleep.
Yes.
It also just gives you, it just buys you also some time, meaning you can focus on what really matters. You can focus on those parts of QA that have to be manual. You can focus on weird issues that you find that need you to do some extra crawls or some extra analysis. And that's really, really important. It also helps you to have that as a fallback in case you miss anything. And you will always do that. So, or in case you lack time, sometimes SEOs are just pressured because if you require to do your QA, for example, on a test environment every time before you say, hey, I give my green light and you can roll out on productive, that means progress is just slower. Many companies don't like that. Now, there's a lot of things you can do. And so now, if you don't have money, or even if you do have money and you have an extra set of tools, you should always have a mix of tools and use one straight from the source where the issues happen, which is start with Google Search Console. That is super important because you get things straight from the source. However, it is insufficient to be used only as as your QA tool, because as we have learned today, there is a delay in when things will be reported to you. And also sometimes their alerts are inconclusive and it takes a while to troubleshoot them. Sometimes they also have false positives. So you should always still use them, but use them as a fallback. So that means you might have done your QA, you might be monitoring things, but eventually some errors will still pop up because you forgot to look elsewhere. It always happens, and it's really important to find those. Of course, the primary goal of your QA should be finding issues before Google finds them. So if you get less alerts, that is very good, but you should still always import Google Search Console alerts. And how can you import them? Well, they have an API. They do not allow you to use that API to get automatic pushes for their alerts, but you can use, so we can come to that, back to that later, but you can use some of those. There's error codes, and you can use, for example,
that
you can
actually
hook it up.
is a great transition. RGSC error codes. Just with our time frame, I know we want to give a little bit of time for SEO Q&A, but let's talk about these codes. This is our 10th day of Christmas, and you actually found some amazing stuff by being curious and looking at Search Console errors.
The first thing I did when I wanted to set up alerts was basically I used Zapier because Google Search Console doesn't have an API. And I pulled in all emails coming in from Search Console into our Slack channel. And then, well, you know what? I was managing 70 websites, 70. That meant, do you know those performance messages that come once a month? Your performance in January. Yeah, so that came 70 times, which dilutes everything else. So like the channel was swamped. So I didn't really appreciate that. Yeah, that was not good. So that's when I realized I was looking for patterns that I could see in those emails to go by. And I saw that there's a little error code they display that is the same code for the same type of error on all your instances. So yeah, and I figured out those that mattered to us. So I wouldn't scan for all of those because it depends. If you, for example, working in an agency, you might want to see when someone says, oh, hey, there's a new user. You might want to know that. Like now, I don't need to know that, but I need to know all those issues. And new issue detected is important. It's not very specific, but you need to know that. But some are a bit more specific as error codes. Now, you can use all those error codes to say, hey, Zapier, whenever, or you ask a developer, hey, whenever there's an email coming from Search Console with that error, please pull it into Slack and maybe show the first line of the email so you actually know what domain is it about if you're managing multiple domains or what type of error that is, or show the error code. And it helps you keep track of that, and even use Slack as a tool to actually manage tasks. So you can use I don't know, a signature or an emoji to say, hey, I'm looking into it, so that not everybody else is jumping at it at the same time. Text people if you say, oh, yeah, it's a real error, here's the ticket link, that kind of thing. It really helps managing those things and prioritizing them.
Gianna, we have to move along, I think, but I know that if you are interested in this, you can click the link here. Gianna explains it all
Full
in
post,
detail.
full glorious post. It is beautiful.
It's
Thank you for giving it
incredible.
community. And
So
again,
make a
we
note
have
to
to
go back.
stress, don't rely just on these. You cannot be solely reactive to Search Console messages, which can be false positives. They can be delayed. They can be a krampus. You don't want that portrait. We want to continue having a great holiday season without ending up in a sack. So our 11th day, our good friends gave to us crawler configs for one and all. Let's talk about the importance of the devil's details when you create crawls.
So you really need to make sure that you're crawling the right things. And I saw in the chat some questions like, how do you crawl a subset of URLs? How do you crawl a directory, etc.? Those are the right questions you should be asking yourself, and you need to figure out what are the configurations that work for you. So your entire team, and I don't mean just SEOs, knows, hey, if we're going to be using a crawler, what's the basic setup and why are we choosing this specific configuration over another one? So
we can't have parity. If we have different crawls, they're absolutely going to give different results. I mean, we're in a world where dynamic functionalities and everything else, no two crawlers are going to give you the same results. Sometimes we're lucky on large sites if we get the same results from 2 consecutive crawls. We'll call out parity is absolutely critical. So regardless of the tool you're working with Screaming Frog, go ahead and save that configuration, name it exactly what it is for the client that it is. In Lumar, you can go ahead and copy in your project your entire crawl settings. That lets you ensure that you are apples to apples as you do these comparisons. Don't introduce new wildcards. You know, suddenly you turned off rendering on a new crawl, everything looks completely different. It's going to actually set you back and how quickly you can adapt and move.
You should maintain quality across your configurations as well.
Absolutely. A good crawl is out to how it was configured. So be transparent. Again, with that source of truth, if you were using like Screaming Frog, go ahead and make sure that configuration file is available to all. If you're using something like Lumar, when a new crawl is set up and you want to make sure that it's parallel, has parity with another tool, you can import it directly, copy it from a different project. These things are important because that way you are consistent in your approach and you're able to compare things in a meaningful way. And with that, we will get to our 12th day of Christmas, which is all the good wishes.
Do we need to say more about this? The vacation period is almost upon us. This is the best way to cap the year, in my opinion. Just saying, hey, next year we're going to start maybe focusing on QA a bit more, carving out the time for it, not just expecting it to happen magically. And ultimately, that's what we wish onto you, a better SEO process and flow with good QA.
And it can apply as you build those relationships to QA. You have good wishes and you are bringing them to the teams and going, hey, devs, I know you want to make good work. I'm here to help you with that. Hey, marketing, I know you want to do good work. Here's how I can be of assistance with you. Let's make sure copywriters, you wrote great content. I want to make sure it's found and ranked, but right now the page doesn't render. When we come with the altruism of we are here to boost other teams' works and work collaboratively, yeah, that's a good season.
I do have to remind everyone, because I keep seeing that question pop up. Who is that? Well, sometimes the Krampus is us as well. So sometimes you can't get through with the good wishes and you can be a Krampus and scare some folks into caring about SEO QA. So depending on how your end of year looks, just, either channel the well wishes and those 12 days of Christmas or go the Krampus side. We won't tell either way.
And if you're not familiar with the Krampus, it's a figure from Alpine folklore of Europe, and it's the counterpart of Santa. The Krampus comes and steals naughty children away, or perhaps comes and steals naughty SEOs or developers that weren't focused on making sure the content was consistently valuable and available.
I saw someone say, my old dev team were giving big Krampus vibes. Yes, you're not alone. That's why I said sometimes you have to fight the Krampus with more Krampus.
Fight Krampus with Krampus. Excellent. All right, let's go to some poll questions. First up, do you QA code changes related to SEO tickets?
I know I do, because I know that whenever we have a change, it can undo some other stuff we had asked for previously. I kept having issues like this.
It was also a big part of my job because I mean you can do the greatest SEO, you can have the greatest ideas and optimization, but then it can all be crushed by a tiny little thing such as something that
Absolutely.
makes your site go de-indexed. It's just awful.
I mean, one of the first trips to outer space, they were trying to send a ship to, I believe, Venus at that point, and there was a missing bar above an R that would signal smooth radius versus jolted radius. And that resulted in NASA having to emergency self-destruct the ship because instead of making a smooth arc to the radius, it was constantly jerking, correcting, and there was a risk it could cause harm. That was one little bar, and that was a massive space program. A dash, a fancy quote can wreck your Christmas. Protect your Christmas. We see here that 79% are taking charge and they are in a place where they are QAing. I will say those who have not, this is a great chance to make allies around your organization. We did have a great request in here for doing a more JavaScript focused QA session, and I'm gonna just leave that over here for my lovely guest speakers today because I think that would be a wonderful follow-up to the series. And if we can get more buy-in from the community to understand not only the importance but the empowerment of doing QA, we're gonna have a great time. All right, next up, how often do you run SEO QA? And while this is being answered, I would love your insights into a question we have in the anonymous poll. How do you deal with pushbacks from devs and sometimes even your boss?
So this, for me, was a source of, I mean, I have an endless series of anecdotes because I worked in dev centers. And your question is very, very important because it really depends on what your situation is, right? We all have different situations that we have to manage. Clients have different budgets, there's different expectations. So there's no right or wrong answer. We just want to know a bit more about what is everyone's reality.
I mean, Gianna has an enforcer. Connie actually comes out and tentacle slaps when there's not respect for QA and really just ensuring that your assets are still working and still functional. So
well,
we see that about...
I usually just put up, like, I have a slide that, you know, I created out of the last time we lost traffic due to QA not being considered, for example. And like, it was like a loss of 80%. So like not in my current job, but in a previous one. And then I just use that and say, told you so. And that usually works. It just works fine as a meme and as a reminder that this is what actually happened on a real website and it was really hurtful and we want to avoid from that. And we always have to invest. It's like with development, most companies have not just development people, they also have DevOps. So people who make sure that the infrastructure is actually working, like the firefighters in the company.
They were on call. They work 36-hour shifts. And if a server is going down, they are the ones called that have to come into work and remember what time.
Yeah, and you have to do, and that's risk management. That's not a growth tactic. Of course not. It's risk management. And you have to do risk management for SEO as well. Simple as that.
All right, I'm actually going to pop through because we are very close to end of time here. And I want to make sure everyone can get to their next meeting set up. If you're ready to dive deeper, we have some options available for you. You can follow Myriam and Gianna on social media. Would you like to give where they can find you at?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You just look for my name, Myriam Jessier. And if you cannot type it, you can also look for Myriam plus SEO and you will find me. Apparently I'm the first result, so that's fun. If I'm not, let me know where and how. And I used to be on Twitter. I'm not anymore, so just find me on LinkedIn, please.
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, but I assume that typing my name will be a bit of a hassle. So I made it an easier one on Twitter. You could still find me on Twitter. You can also find me on Mastodon with Tentacle Quing.
And that's QUING for both of those. Do highly recommend follow that link to Gianna's excellent post on breaking down those codes and how to use them meaningfully. If you're looking for more of my soothing ASMR voice, and I promise not to try and sing terribly anymore, we have some SEO interviews with Grace Farlick and with Katie Kazmarak coming out. There's a new blog available. And of course, we'll have an upcoming webinar. This one specifically for those of you out there who are working in the high stress world of fintech. This is SEO for fintech and the financial industry, unique challenges and solutions. And our guest is going to be Ben Beckwith with Go Henry. That'll be Wednesday, January 18th at 5 p.m. GMT. Hope to see you all there. Thank you so much to my guests. Is there one last gift that you want to give to our audience here, or one last cautionary tale of a Krampus?
I'm going to end on a positive note and just thank everyone for coming and repeat what I've been saying nonstop. Everything we have spoken about is reliant on you carving out the time to make this happen. So you need to start with that and explain why QA is necessary to get that time allocated. Because otherwise, what happens is going without
Myriam
any
is frozen.
time.
You froze in an excellent pose. We missed the last couple of words of that one. Want to do it? Take two?
I have to pass it along to Gianna. I do not trust the internet right now.
That
is fair. It should not be trusted.
Okay, so my final word, or our final word of caution is don't always only check for the obvious that's on page, but also check for example, if you're using CMSs that allow plugins to be used, check for vulnerabilities. There are services that will, for example, at the very minimum, send you newsletters that will say these are all vulnerabilities for example, specific JavaScript frameworks that you might be using. And those vulnerabilities can be really, really helpful, cost you a lot of money, and you might be liable for what's happening on your website. Oh, Connie was so shocked he actually fell over.
Connie fainted.
Well, yeah, but he can't break anything, so it's, you know, it's fine. So that's the one thing that I want to keep have people keep in mind. We actually had a horror case where a cookie notice pop up. So those of you who are in Europe know how awful that is, but you have to have it. And that actually didn't only stop the page from rendering, but it could lead to other issues. So for example, Google receiving empty pages. I mean, the page speed is pretty sweet.
If you require interaction on that cookie notice to render content, Googlebot's not going to click. It does not have fingers.
Yeah.
All right, my last gift to you all is in the spirit of Connie, who fainted in shock at this last one. And it feels like you might need 8 arms to accomplish SEO QA. And yeah, that's pretty fair. Honestly, it's a lot of work, but we can automate. We can actually outsource when we work smart and systematically and cooperatively, use things like crawlers, use things that work to do SEO QA in lower environments. Check out that Protect product. There's a lot of ways to make this meaningful and impactful and still keep your sanity. I hope you get to shut off your laptop and have some time with those you care about. No matter how many paws or tentacles they have, you are important. Your relationships with them are important, and you deserve all the best in this cold and snowy times.